tired of feeling tired? Done with diet culture? Overwhelmed by conflicting nutrition and fitness messages? Then join us, your hosts of the Nutrition Revolution podcast, as we take a deep dive into all things women's fitness and nutrition. I'm Kimberly.
And I'm Tabitha. And together we are debunking diet culture myths and giving you the tools you need to finally see the results you're looking for. It's time to revolutionize your nutrition and training.
Welcome back to another episode of the Nutrition Revolution podcast. Today we are excited to have Sam Withrow with us. She is a licensed clinical social worker working with women who have body image issues or, just need some self-esteem and support. And we're excited to have her on to talk to us today. Sam, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and maybe what got you into your specific field?
Sure. So thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, you're welcome.
So
We're thrilled to have
you for the invite. I am an LCSW. I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And I've been in outpatient running psychotherapy, private practice services for a really long time. I do primarily work with women. I have quite a few male clients too that have stuck with me for a long time, but I do primarily work with women. I find it's just often, right, in psychotherapy, there is a gender alliance, especially when you get to become an adult. I have historically seen a lot, and I do still currently see a lot of adult women who have body image, self-esteem issues, and a lot of them do have poor relationships with food. So my work has been split. I mean, historically, I actually started in victim services. I worked with domestic violence and sexual assault victims, and I worked with a lot of police departments, some SVU, things like that. So I went to undergrad at UD, and then I went from there and did my master's work in South Carolina and graduated from USC. From there, I came home and I did some inpatient work and moved right kind of from victim services on the DV and sexual assault side and moved into mental health, seeing kind of the diagnostic side and how that presents. And from there, I've kind of been working in the outpatient side, which is a different vibe and kind of flows very differently, but it's the place where all of these issues come together, right? So I've worked in some eating disorder clinics. I've worked a lot with teen girls for a long period of time. I ran a bunch of teen girls, teen body image issue groups, and ran like a pretty cool curriculum for them because, as you guys know, I mean, where we're located geographically in Kent County, Delaware, we definitely have a lack of resources, whether it's teen girls or adult women or adult men or athletes, right? We lack resources and we lack providers for any kind of specialized issue, whether it's body image, self-esteem, etc. And because I've had a lot of experience working with victims of violent crimes, self-esteem, body image, kind of the manipulation that goes into the psychology relationships with those victims rolls over into our relationships with a lot of things, with other people, with food, whatever it is. So I've kind of taken it upon myself to train a little bit more, especially when it comes to food. And now that a lot of my clients are in that perimenopause space, food is really important. Our relationship with food, we're seeing the rise of a lot of things right now. So as the relationship with food, especially in my adult female clients, has changed. I have, I worked with the IAEDP certification for a while.
And what does that stand for, listeners?
For IAEDP, that stands for, it's an international organization, and it is just International Association of Eating Disorders Professionals.
Okay.
And so I just became a member, did a bunch of their trainings, and worked with a variety of different eating disorders, and really held a lot of those clients in Kent County for a while. Again, whether it was anorexia nervosa, bulimia, whatever we're talking, RFID, different things. And so that was in that period of time, like I said, where I was running a lot of groups, whether it was teen girls, some adult women, but portion of my practice has always been victim services. A portion has always been kind of women and girls with self-esteem and body image issues. Some of that has overlapped with eating disorders, poor relationship with food, especially like the ADHD overlap with food, things like that. And then, in the last probably 10 years, 10 years, I've also done a lot of forensic work, which is an offshoot of the victim work that I've primarily done. So, I work a lot with high conflict families that come from the court. So this is parent coordination, co-parenting services. For a while I did reunification. I no longer do that, but I did therapeutic visitation, custody evaluations, things like that. So, and again, these are people who have a variety of different issues. And so the relationships are really complicated and really complex. Issues that show up in the kids, issues that show up for the parents, for a variety of things. So self-esteem, body image, right, could show up in those relationships too, but it's not what you're primarily screening for.
Right.
Yeah. So in terms of my background, pretty varied, right? Mental health, eating disorders, self-esteem, forensic and high conflict, court-ordered stuff, some substance abuse, although that's not primarily really a passionate issue for me. So yeah, I would say that's probably a fair overview of my psychopathology
How long have you been
history.
in this industry?
2009.
Oh wow, long time.
Maybe.
Yeah.
I think I started at the courthouse on North King Street. I think I was helping victims with Child Inc. file for PFAs.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think 2009 with Child Inc. was the first, and then from there I went to People's Place, and I worked with the SAFE program. Back then it was Contact Lifeline, and I was doing on-call rape crisis. I think it was called a rape crisis counselor, which is a really bad job title.
Yeah,
but it's a really, literally
Maybe
terrible
change
job
something.
title.
Yeah.
But I think it was literally like rape crisis counselor is what it was called. And so I would work like a week shift or a weekend shift or whatever it was, and you would just get called out. And I worked St. Francis. I worked in Newcastle County because I was up north at the time. And from there I went over and did People's Place in Baltimore. So I was off Argonne Drive and east. So I ran part of their client services department over in Baltimore, and at the time they were an 84-bed facility. They covered Baltimore City and Baltimore County.
That's crazy.
For domestic violence. So they were an interesting, really interesting agency because they housed victims and families and offered community-based services, but they also ran the intervention programs for the offenders, which is kind of uncommon. Yeah, I mean, and they ran a lot of grants throughout the city. They were a fantastic agency, but very ingratiated into the Baltimore City community.
So you have obviously a lot of experience in working with quite a few different populations.
Yeah.
But specifically, some of the things you talked about or mentioned that you do work quite a bit with women that have body image issues, self-esteem, and then the food, nutrition,
absolutely,
the relationships there. And that's obviously something that we want to focus on through this podcast. That's a lot of our focus of our listeners. So what would you say inspired you to get into that specific part of counseling, and to want to continue on and get certifications and further your education to help women that have disordered eating or eating disorders? Was there like a personal aha moment that you were like, this is the path that I want to take, or I want to be a resource for people struggling with their relationship with food, with body image, all of the above?
So I don't think it was so much an aha moment as it was that thing that happens to outpatient therapists where we end up with, I call them waves of clients, where we end up with like a grouping. And even to this day, even though I've had some of my clients in very much a maintenance phase, they're doing very well, I still end up with a wave where it will be a similar life circumstance or situation or symptom presentation, and it will happen to over a period of time, a group of the people I'm working with simultaneously, and their clinical needs will all present as, I have 5 people, or I have 6 people, or 8 people, or whatever, and they all need something similar at the same time. And at the time, I think just had to be, I don't know, maybe, I don't even remember how long ago actually, but this was way before pre-COVID. I had teenage girls. I had probably 10 or 12 teenage girls on my case list that were all presenting with really significant and severe eating disorder behaviors. And 2 of them actually, I can recall, ended up going inpatient up at AI. Both of them ended up going, I think it was Renfro from there. But I mean, really severe anorexia nervosa, like sleeping heart rate was like under 40. Like, it was really bad. And there were a variety of factors, right, that had presented long before this. And they were fairly new to me when I got them. But after that, right, I ended up with a wave of teenage girls that were not as severe in their presentation, right? Because to drop somebody whose anorexia nervosa is already that established and the pattern is that serious, right, where they need inpatient treatment in like session 3 is very difficult. But I ended up with a group of teenage girls that really all kind of needed the same thing. And at that point, it was very much a create a group for these girls. Like I kind of have already addressed, we have a lack of providers with specialties. And it's not because we have bad providers here. It's just because we don't have enough providers here, right? We have a lot of need. We don't have a lot of providers. And so I started making a group. You know, I was pulling resources and I was pulling old materials that I had used when I was working at an eating disorder clinic in Carolina. And I put together a group for teenage girls. And I started to run it on the weekends. And then I put together a second group. And from there, I started to have that Delaware thing that happens where, as you guys know, you get one person who tells another person and then they tell their friend. And before you know it...
This is how I found you.
100%. And then before you know it, you have an entire like 55 and up community. Yeah. And you don't know you have the entire 55 and up community because it's not like they all have the same last name until one of them says, hey, I told my friend about you at bingo last night and she's on your case list for next week. Yeah. And I was like... Great. Sounds good. Right. And this happened from an eating disorder perspective or from a body image or poor relationship to food. So it started with teenage girls. It started with the creation of a group. Right. And then it kind of grew into adult women. And then it grew from there because I had so many adult women who were having problems with weight management, right? Binge eating. And I am very lucky to have had a really great relationship with the psychiatrists and the med providers, the nurse practitioners at the last practice that I was working with pre-COVID, as I've been on my own since COVID. But we talked a lot about the medications in terms of medication options for my clients who had mood disorder diagnoses, right? What is going to cause weight gain? What is going to help with the binge eating, right? But simultaneously, I don't want to increase anxiety. Like in terms of blocking out what are these options, because I'm a big advocate of the therapeutic provider being a part of those conversations. So I had good relationships that I've worked very hard to maintain with them. And I still have those relationships with the med providers that I worked with and work with now. And so I think that it became binge eating and then it became the other types of eating issues that I started to see on a more diverse basis. So it started with teen girls and then it moved into more binge eating. And we had other providers in our practice because I was working at as the clinical director at the time who started doing bariatric assessments, right? They needed training on bariatric assessments. And so it became training for bariatric assessments, but I need to train myself because if I'm going to train someone else, I most definitely need to be competent and well-read, right? So it became training on a diverse variety of issues. And then it became more of not a specialty so much, but more of an exposure, right, to issues that I was starting to see.
When I saw some of my clients deal with everything that you've talked about. And I reached out to like my network of people. Yeah. And I was like, hey, I need someone right away who can deal with food eating disorders and body image in a more intense level without someone having to go to inpatient or without them having to go to just a therapist who talks to them, right? Like I wanted her to have the client to have,
professional help for
and like
their
to
eating
walk
disorder.
away with like, here's the things I actually can start applying. And I talked to probably 10 different therapists, psychologists, and no one knew where to send me help. Like they had no idea. And 2 people gave me your name.
So
and
now we
like,
know.
she's the only one in the Delaware that does it. And I was like, wow. And I have Googled and researched and called, and you're it. Congrats.
No, that's crazy.
So really, you saw a need. All of a sudden, you
Yeah.
had clients that were presenting with this binge eating disorder starting at a young age, and you realized, okay, there's a serious need here. You went on, you got additional training and certifications, education to be able to be the provider that's needed. So it wasn't so much as like this personal mission or your own experiences. It was you saw a need in your community and you're here to fill it. I love that. You were talking about binge eating, seeing that a lot. I would like to take a few minutes for our listeners. Like, what do you find to be some of the most common misconceptions about relationship, like your food relationship, and some of the most common issues that you see in women that are, from like early young adulthood on up?
Okay. Well, first, thank you. Second, I will definitely give you guys some more names because there are people that I trained, right?
Good.
And
Yeah.
I want everyone to have access to those services. Since we just acknowledged, right, that I found a need and that was the basis of me just training myself, right? There are others that I trained as well and that took that interest and developed it also. So I want to make sure that that access continues for other
And we
people.
can
We definitely link
we'll
those
facilitate
providers.
that at a later point in time. But I just want to make sure that
Thank you.
for the listeners that are interested or have that need, that they have access to that information. Because it's less, like I said, of a specialty for me and more of like an interest and just being a good therapist to make sure that my clients have their needs met.
Yeah.
So in terms of addressing the binge eating side of things and
Misconceptions about
Yeah.
food relationships, what you see common.
Yeah. So I would say there's lots of misconceptions about binge eating. That is a really complex question. Oh man, that's a big one. It's a giant umbrella, right, of a question.
Think that like our clients sometimes will come to us and say like,
Yeah.
I just can't stop binge eating. And then I'll talk to them, or like we'll look at their food diaries and stuff and see, and like their idea of binge eating is like
Everything.
I ate a Hershey bar today and I never eat Hershey bars, but I don't know what happened. I just started eating, like
Yeah.
there's a difference between like enjoying food and
That is the misconception. Yes, is that,
So when do they get
So
help?
enjoying food
Yeah.
is not synonymous with binge eating.
absolutely, right? Like you don't have to be Tara Reid on TLC, right? With Carson Daly. And I feel like it's not 1999, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I feel like though that that's so important. And I joke with my people all the time about it. I mean, everyone who works with me, I feel like it's probably says like Sam's nuts and I'm tired of her obscure references from 2004, but
I'm here for it.
They're never going to stop. Okay.
Yeah.
So get over it if you work with me. It's signed into the contract, but I do think that is probably the biggest misconception that I can give you, right? Is that enjoying food and having a positive relationship with food really means that food, you accept that food is going to be a part of your life and you have to eat it. And sometimes you eat a lot of it, right? Binge eating, right? Binge eating disorder.
Hold on. I want to put that on a shirt.
Yes.
Food is going to be a part of your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
You have to accept that.
Yeah.
slogan.
So that means
Sometimes
that eating
you eat a
it,
lot of it.
and then also enjoying it is a part of life. Like, stop fighting against that.
Yes. Yes.
thank you.
Absolutely.
I'm putting that on a
100%.
shirt.
Stop shaming
Fantastic.
yourself
I'm
for
gonna sell it.
having desire to eat food.
Yes.
And that
Yes.
is not problematic. Like, that does
No.
not mean that you have disordered eating
No.
or
Yeah.
that's just part of the human
There's nothing
experience.
you're not broken.
Right. But think about how we were all conditioned, right?
Absolutely.
And this is, I feel like, the biggest step when I have someone who has, what they feel is binge eating, right? Is the deconditioning part comes first, is what do you define as binge eating? And sometimes it is binge eating and sometimes it's not, right? And the psychological kind of programming that goes into understanding what is binging and what's not, right? And a lot of the interesting part is a lot of the online programming that we see, right? That's designed to break the cycle, if you will. There are air quotes for our listeners to this for me, right? About like understanding the emotion that goes to then using binge eating or food in general, right, as a coping skill. And really, it's problematic because food is not always a maladaptive or a bad coping response, right? We use food as nurturing. Interestingly enough, like when I run forensic services, right, if I'm running a therapeutic or a reunification system, which is when we have a parent and a child who are not aligned and they're coming back together for whatever reason. Sometimes there's bad behavior. Sometimes, there's not bad behavior, but they've been separated. At a certain point in those sessions, I have the parent bring food, right? Food is nurturing, right? So, and that parent has to be able to tell me what is that kid's favorite food. 9 times out of 10, they're going to pick up Chick-fil-A, right? But sometimes, like I had a parent bring a giant box of goldfish from Sam's Club, and the kid was so happy that the parent could remember the goldfish was his favorite snack. But the point is that food is a way to nurture. Food is a way to show affection. And so sometimes when we show affection to ourselves, it's through food. Right? So it's sometimes we're angry and then we have a response, right, in our environment, and that environmental response might be maladaptive. It's really when does it become dysfunctional or problematic? And it's hard to determine that individually and by yourself, right?
What would you say are the hallmarks, though, of like top 3 to 5 signs of this is maladaptive versus this is just human experience?
So pattern would be one. Consistent pattern, right? Deception, right? Like, are you hiding?
Okay.
Right? So the dishonesty and deception of it, I think, is going to be part one. Not
like
necessarily.
you ate all the Oreos, and then someone says, "Who ate all the Oreos?" and you say, "I don't know."
Oh no! Yeah,
Or you're hiding in their trash.
But like a pattern of that, right?
Okay.
Because I absolutely will hide the good bag of sour cream and onion chips from my husband and children because they were flavored correctly. And
No,
if
I
you
have a
eat-
whole chocolate cabinet. Well, it's a shelf, actually.
It's a shelf.
But my family knows about it, so it's not a secret. They'll be like, "Oh, that's up in Mom's chocolate shelf, on Mom's chocolate shelf."
Yeah.
But like, so I get it. Okay.
Yeah, and
So
I
you-
hide them because they're mine and don't touch
I feel
them.
like it's
I don't want to
maladaptive.
share with you.
But I
right?
find
not
it very
the,
healthy.
I'm eating this and then hiding it under layers of trash.
Correct.
Every time I eat it.
or
Yes.
denying even that you have it and or are eating it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So deception, right? And pattern, I think, is really important too, because let's use deception as an example. If you eat all the Oreos, right? If you eat 2 whole sleeves of Oreos, right? And then you hide it, but you do that once, right? And you do that maybe whatever the frequency is, right? And where it's not at a frequency where like it's making you sick or it's making you vomit or whatever it is, but you don't lie about it enough, right? So like, but if you do that every 2 days, right? If the frequency itself, right, becomes really pattern oriented. So we're looking at pattern oriented behavior. We're looking at deception. There's this whole concept really to any psychological disorder, right? Which is dysfunction, right? You could have all of the symptoms of something, but is there a level of dysfunction? At what point does this interrupt your day-to-day functioning, right? It's always about dysfunction and functioning. And so, when we're talking about binge eating, is there weight gain, right? Is it significant? And is there a level of function and dysfunction? We're always going to measure that, right? We're always going to measure the psychological response, because there are some people who are going to have a binge eating response, but they're not going to have the psychological dysfunction about it, right? They're not going to get distressed. They're not going to have a mood response to it, right? Which we can treat differently, right? There are some people that are very confident despite, right, the fact that they might be using food as a response to things. So that's a very different way that we would respond to that or treat that.
Is it causing you stress?
Correct. Is it causing you stress?
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of ways that we're going to gauge what is binge eating and what is binge eating disorder, right? Kind of like think about how we have alcohol, right? So we have alcohol where we binge alcohol, right? We have a binge substance use disorder, but then we also have a dependency, right? So if you put food in a similar framework, right, which we don't have to because it's not technically in the DSM-5 like that, right? That's not how we contextualize it from, a clinical diagnostic framework. But if you think about it just from explaining it sitting around this table, right? Is there a dependency? Is there a pattern in which there is a dysfunction, right? Is there a pattern that falls into place, right, where there is a mood disordered almost response to something and almost a physical disordered response? Or is there also for some people an occasional response, right? And we treat them differently. Not that one has more or less, right? But we treat them differently in how we kind of categorize and we develop a treatment plan.
Gotcha.
Love that. Okay.
Right.
Now, what would you say to a listener that's maybe thinking, I think I may not necessarily have like binge eating disorder, but I have binging behaviors or tendencies that can cause me stress.
Yeah.
What is the best or the number one mindset tool or strategy that you could give them here now to begin to start thinking? Obviously, they would need, it takes more than just one mindset from a clinical, licensed therapist, but for someone that is maybe looking to overcome that.
Yeah.
What do you think it starts with, I guess, is the best way to...
To be honest, okay, so this is controversial. It's controversial. You probably know this, Kimberly. I actually am not a big fan of food journaling. I'm not a big pro of food journaling. I think that when it's done correctly and when it's done kind of in collaboration with like the right providers in the right context, when it's framed in a really positive way, like when you're working with someone who values your nutrition and your wellness, it can be done really well, right? But the reason I say that is because often people will be like, food journal, right? Food journaling helps you be mindful about what you're eating. 9 times out of 10, food journaling adds shame and makes you count calories, right?
Okay,
and so generally speaking, women overwhelmingly do not need to pay more attention to things. We pay so much freaking attention to everything.
We know what we're doing.
Okay, I might not know how many calories are in the Teddy Grahams snack pack that I just ate, but I'm well aware that I just ate it. And subconsciously, I will punish myself for it.
You're carrying that with you no matter
absolutely.
what,
Okay,
whether
I
you
will
wrote it down or not.
Because I will pound some telegrams. But like in general, right? Like we do not need women to be more hyper vigilant, and food journaling can overwhelmingly be more of a weapon for women at early stages, especially once we get like a pattern really well established of like self-acceptance, we raise that self-esteem, we're working on other things. Then we can maybe talk about food journaling. But in the beginning, the reason I say that is because most of the time you're going to hear things like food journaling used as a mindfulness tool, and I'm actually not a fan of it in the beginning. So in terms of mindfulness, I'm actually more of a fan of like EMD. So in EMDR, we have EMDR and then we have EMD. Okay?
And what are those?
I'll break it down. So in EMDR, we have so the R in EMDR, and EMDR is so popular right now, right? Like it's everywhere. Everybody's doing it. It's such a thing.
Everyone raves about it.
Everyone loves to reprocess, right? Which rock on, man. Reprocess the world. Do it. I'm going to get that as a bumper sticker.
Yeah.
Nobody will know what it means. But yeah, I mean, it's on like Grey's Anatomy, and if House was still on, they'd probably make an EMDR episode there.
They definitely would.
They would, for sure. I would watch it. I can't complain. But yeah, so the R in EMDR stands for reprocess, right? So this is where we take like a negative stimuli. So this would be like an event, a trauma, something that's making you anxious, a relationship to food, right? The negative belief you have about yourself because of your weight would be what we call a negative cognition. And you are working on desensitizing yourself to it, right? So you can't take it away. Like if something really bad happened when you were a kid, you can't change the thing that made you, that upset you from when you were a child, but you can change sometimes the emotional pattern, right? The cognitive neuropath that's there. You can kind of decrease the stimulation path that's there. So you can be a little less reactive. It's really all about reactivity. EMDR is all about reactivity. So in EMD, though, what we do is we're not actually, and it's not separate, it's just kind of like a containment method or a coping response that we teach out of the script of EMDR. So what it is it's basically a way to ground yourself using the EMDR toolbook, okay? So grounding's a big thing, right? It was on the cover of Time magazine for like, God, I don't know, 4 years running, right? I love grounding. I love coping mechanisms. These are big buzzwords that have been all over the place lately, right? EMD really focuses on the somatic response that we have to something. So there's still the mindfulness aspect, right? But what it is we use our own body, right? When I do it with my people, I do it with our hands, right? And I still do a lot of virtual work, so I've had to learn how to modify this where they are actually doing it themselves.
Is this still, they're still doing like the tapping?
They are, yeah. Except for they're tapping where we're not focusing on a specific thing, right? Like my relationship to my body or weight, but we are focusing on instead like a physical sensation, right? So I'm focusing on my heart rate. I'm focusing on the pain I feel in my chest. But you can EMD, right? Which means you can breathe and tap and slow down, right? The anxiety you're feeling about something, right? You can slow down kind of your physical response to happening in your body as opposed to what's happening with a bigger trigger, like the entire relationship you feel to food, right? So this is, I tell my people, this is a skill you put in your pocket, right? And you can walk around with, because you could literally be like at your kid's volleyball game or like, in the car with your spouse and just like be tapping on your thighs and nobody's going to know, right? You're just like chilling, looking out the window, just kind of doing slow taps and taking deep breaths. So when you have someone who's like, I'm going to eat those Oreos, I'm going to eat them freaking Oreos, right? Like, and you're just sitting there, right? You're tapping, and instead of focusing on the Oreos, you're focusing on what you're feeling in your body, right? Like, I'm feeling really anxious. Tap, tap, tap. right?
Okay.
And so what it does is it makes you focus on the emotion. So it makes you label the emotion, right? Which is often a thing in binge eating, right? We have an emotional trigger, we have an emotional response. It makes you label the emotion. And then it also makes you learn how to code or how to then calm down the emotion because you have to find it in your body. I'm feeling pain in my back. I'm feeling my chest is really tight. I'm finding that my hands are shaky, right? You have to not only label the emotion, but then after you label the emotion, you have to find it in your body. And then you have to learn how to calm it down, right? So it is like a 3-in-1 situation, but it takes 30 seconds and it's portable.
I think that's really good because one of the strategies that I do with my clients with emotional eating, like, every time I'm stressed out, I go and I eat like a bag of whatever. One of the things I talk to them about is being a conscious eater. Saying like, we talk about this, like, I didn't just eat all of those things. I chose to have this. Like, I did this consciously. And one of the things, I know you don't like journals, but one of the things I don't always do.
Sometimes.
So I am like you.
Hate it always.
I'm like you. Like, I'm not a calorie tracker.
Yeah.
I don't make all my clients do journal tracking. It depends on what their goals are. Sometimes it's just, you need to consciously be present with your food. Like, you need to be aware. And so one of the things they'll do is like write down, here's what I ate and here's the feelings that I had during this. So like, I used to have this journal where it was like a little extra note so that they could write. And it started when I worked for a gym and I would lead these like little nutrition small groups. Women would hand in their food journals and they would prejudge themselves. So they would give me a food journal and it would be like happy face or a sad face. And I was like, what? Why are you prejudging? Like, you don't even know what I'm going to say.
Or they feel like they have to give you an explanation of like, okay, actually,
I like the almonds, but they had chocolate on them.
So-and-so's birthday
Nobody
party
cares.
and there was this
almonds.
there. Like,
So I'm like, why are you prejudging yourself already? Like, you, and then I would go through and I'd be like, oh my gosh, look at all this protein that you ate. Like, that's awesome. And they're like,
all this
I
fiber
didn't even
and plant foods.
I thought you were just looking at the sugar content. And I was like, no, like, there's more to eating than me judging your sugar content.
Absolutely.
But these are those, preconceived notions that's what a nutritionist or anyone who's going to look at your nutrition does.
Big thing is like, people automatically are always like, well, what are you going to tell me I can't eat?
Right.
What are these foods you can take from me? Like, not a single thing.
That.
Not a single thing. In fact, I'm going to help you learn how to work all those things into a balanced meal and plate.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I love that because what it's doing is bringing your, you still have feelings around food. You can't get rid of your feelings around food. That's just, we all have feelings when we're eating, and that's, part of life. So it's making the eating experience a more conscious experience. Like, you're thinking about it before you're just diving into something.
I think that's so powerful. I think the fact, and you hit the nail on the head about journaling, right? Is acknowledging that when we eat at certain times, it comes as an emotional response, acknowledging the emotional response. That's the basis, right, of conscious eating, right? We're not judging what we're eating, but we are working on understanding the emotion behind it. That's important. That's the journaling piece that sometimes we miss.
And that's the piece people want to shove down.
They
don't want to say.
Well, that's the hard work, too.
It is.
Yeah, they don't want to say, I ate this because I was angry at my husband and this food makes me feel better. But, like, be honest. And if you can bring that into the light and share that, like, it's going to help you be like, oh, I recognize that as a response to my eating.
Yeah. And I think you both kind of acknowledged something that I really, in the beginning, I spend a lot of time having to do is when I said deconditioning earlier, what I mean is kind of almost like generational food trauma. I don't really know what else to call it. That's kind of what it's become. I don't obviously know how the two of you grew up with moms and food, but moms and food, I feel like takes up a huge chunk, whether it's in the very beginning or sometimes I feel like it's after the first 2 to 3 sessions it comes up is my mom was on the Atkins diet, or my
100%.
mom. Oh my God,
Metafast.
Oh Lord, Tybo.
24-hour Hollywood
Her
fix.
300
The
calories
number-
of oatmeal that she could have
Yes.
4 times a day.
Yes.
Oh my gosh,
And
yes.
the number of times I've had to hear about someone's mom's Tybo tapes, right? Like, or jazzercise or whatever it is, right? And exercise is always a piece of that, I think, in the stories that I hear. And I by no means, right, do I want to not hear about that because it helps me understand how they were shaped.
Yes.
Right. But how generationally, right, we're all of a similar age. But like generationally, we grew up in a very different era, right? I made the joke earlier about Tara Reid and TLC, but generationally, we were conditioned to have a very different attitude to food, to have very different body expectations.
If your hip bones aren't sticking out, girl, you can't wear those
them low-rider jeans, right? That hit where the C-section scar is, pass, right? There's still trauma when I walk into Target, and I'm like, can we raise them like a cool 6 inches?
See low-rise start to come back. I'm so triggered.
No, thank you.
I am like, I'm going to
you don't want like
to
your
my high-waisted
G-string hanging out over those.
I mean, I did at 16.
At 16, right? Remember the little tan line with like the little heart?
Playboy
Oh,
bunny.
100%.
Absolutely.
Had
it. Same. No. Yeah. So like generationally, we were conditioned to have a very different understanding. But like I have said, I have 2 girls, right? And when I take them to the store, whatever store it is, right? But I just threw out Target. You see very different messaging, right? Whatever your feelings are about like how sexualized the clothing is, that's a different conversation. But in general, the messaging that they are receiving, girls in science, girl power, right? Just the way that the
inclusive
messaging,
sizing, mannequins,
adaptive
and
clothing,
models.
right?
Yeah.
Very different in terms of messaging that we're teaching.
Agree,
right?
100%.
And so I think, and they are being raised by moms who, not just those of us around this table, but generationally, right? Who did grow up with that level of conditioning and are overwhelmingly attempting to reverse some of that generational trauma. We are not eating the Atkins diet, right? We're not eating all white foods today or all green foods on Wednesday or whatever diet that was. The Mediterranean diet, I don't remember.
Yeah.
But like, in general, right, we have seen a lot of generational trauma from the relationship our moms had to food.
Right.
And so that shows in my clients, right, is still very unrealistic expectations, poor self-esteem, right? So that when I say deconditioning, it really is a lot of understanding how far they are into that. And most of them have gotten a good portion of the way into that because they're with me at that point. They recognize something is not right.
I need help.
Yes. And this is not right. And I'm tired of hearing mom talk about
which is so strong
whatever
and
it
brave
is.
for the record. If you're listening and you're like, hey, I'm going to look up Sam or are with
Whoever.
another provider, somebody like hats off to you for doing the
Fantastic.
work, doing the hard stuff.
Sometimes I feel like people don't realize that their food trauma, generational food trauma, is worth going and seeing someone for. I think they think, in my experience, oh, well, this is just something I can get over with willpower. And then their willpower runs out and then they're dealing with shame and they don't realize that sometimes just releasing this to someone and getting some strategies can be a literal lifesaver.
Yeah.
Or even that it's like not even necessarily a real thing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's kind of hokey or they'll make fun of it.
Well, when you look
talk
at
about
therapists,
food relationship,
you find therapists who treat depression and anxiety and drug and alcohol addiction and marriage. But really, I mean, if you Google, like they think that, oh, okay, well, my food stuff, I'm not throwing up or I'm not starving myself. So I don't go to like a, food therapist, like a hospital. I don't go to like an inpatient thing. Like I don't have an eating disorder. I have disordered eating, and that I can just fix on my own because TikTok told me I could.
Or a willpower issue because I'm eating these foods that I shouldn't. So that's what I encounter most with the clients that I work with, which are predominantly like teenage athletes and then women, anywhere in their late 20s, well into their 50s and beyond. It's this mindset of, I can't have this. I can't have that. I shouldn't want this. I shouldn't want that.
Right.
So I focus very heavy on like nutrition by addition. That's like one of my taglines.
I love that.
So instead of necessarily food journaling, in the tracking process that we do of what they're eating, it's always from the framework of what can we add to this plate and add in to make sure that all of your nutrients are there, that you even have your satisfaction built in, and start viewing food from the lens of, stop viewing it from the lens of, I can't have carbs, I can't have a bagel, I can't have a donut because somebody, probably Shape magazine circa 2001, told me that if I want to be thin, can't have
bread.
Exactly. Which the Bible says is the staff of life. So I'm not sure. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I tried very much to get them to flip that script and instead view it as like every time they're making a meal, the end goal of the tracking being to learn to build a better plate with the nutrition by addition mindset of adding all of these nutrients, and then getting to the point where you can build in the satisfaction piece. For example, having a turkey sandwich with avocado, lettuce, tomato on a whole grain, everything bagel with, you know, some apple slices. And then like for me, my satisfaction piece would be adding in my salty potato chips that I love.
Okay.
Right. So like balanced meal, all the nutrients are there, but you're building in that satisfaction as well. Okay. Feedback.
I think that is a sustainable way to learn to eat in a healthy framework. But I would also say that it's important to be able to enjoy food just for the purpose of satisfaction.
Okay, yes,
there
absolutely.
are moments, and so I think that it's those moments that result in the biggest amount of guilt and labeling and shame, right? Is because I want ice cream just because I want ice cream, but there's no, I haven't filled my nutritional goals because do I have to make my ice cream protein ice cream? Do I have to make my ice cream, you know, non-dairy ice cream, etc.? And there are times maybe where that's appropriate, right? But I also want people to be able to have the level of confidence, self-esteem, whatever it is, where they just go and get the ice cream because they just want the ice cream. And they're
regardless
okay.
of what they've eaten or have not eaten.
And in your world, you label it the satisfaction principle, right?
Yes.
Whatever you label it as, right? That there are times where the satisfaction principle is just met, and that, you know, and I think for certain clients, maybe we have to quantify, right, based on whatever their physical needs are, right? Or is the goal that we're trying to lose weight? Is the goal that we're just trying to meet nutritional deficiencies, right? And that depends on what their goals are, you know, what their starting place is for them, and also kind of what their psychological state is, right? Because if their psychological state is so impaired that they've been restricting pretty severely, then we don't want to quantify how many times they want to meet the satisfaction principle, right? If the fact that they're learning about the satisfaction principle independently and are just learning to include it in basic meals, I think is important, right? But I think overwhelmingly from the psychological side, what we see is I want people who have that level of like deficiency or exclusion, right, in their food because they have shame or they have guilt or they have that level of I can't, I shouldn't, I won't, I can't, right? I want them to be able to eat food simply for the purpose of enjoying or wanting the food without the presence of shame.
Yeah.
Right? Just because they want the
It's
food.
almost like a step program.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
First we have to identify. Then we have to learn that eating food shouldn't produce shame.
Absolutely.
All food, any food, eat it. Just eat the food.
Yeah.
And then you can start building in some of those ways to, let's say you have a goal of like, all right, I'm 100 pounds overweight and I need to lose weight. Then you start building in those things in a way that is healthy and safe, that your mind can actually handle at that time.
Yeah.
Okay.
This is always an aha moment with clients that tend to have more work to do with their food mindset, food relationship. It's like, what are the 3 things that you actually physically cannot live without? That life will stop? Air, water, food. You take one of those 3 out, obviously take away air, you're going to be gone much quicker, right?
Much quicker.
But you take any one of those 3 out and life is going to stop. So food is essential. You have to have it. And there's so many times when I like just make that, I don't know, it's not an analogy, a compare, what's the word that I'd be looking for? Just bring that awareness. Like you're fighting against something, you're feeling guilty for something that is actually essential to life, right? And it's so many times clients are like, oh, wow, I've like actually never thought of it that way, that I have to have this. This isn't necessarily the enemy. I got to stop fighting against it and learn instead to like work with it.
It's my favorite thing with working with new clients when they come and do like a nutrition intake or something. Usually we don't even talk about food first. I talk about like, how'd you grow up? Tell me about your life. Like they're like, wait, I thought we were supposed to talk about what I'm eating today. And I was like, well, there's so much more. Because if you can't eat anything without feeling guilty, there's really no point in, like
or
talking
your
about
list
your
of
food yet.
what you
Like
can't have is so much longer than your list of what you can have.
Right.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Well, I also find, and this comes up sometimes, is like just feeling overwhelmed is such my clients have a big presence of that, where part of the reason I see the long lists, right, of what they can't have is because you're right. Shape magazine in 2001 or whatever gave a list of the highest carb foods, right? And they were maybe at their most psychologically impressionable, and they committed it to memory, right? Because at that point in time, right, what was most important to them? It was body image. And then now, though, what happens is we are so inundated with information, right, all of the time that I don't know when the last time was you guys tried to pick like a magnesium supplement, right? And let me be clear, I'm not recommending magnesium. I'm not a medical provider that should be recommending magnesium, but just have you been online lately to try to look at the difference between magnesium glycinate and magnesium citrate and what both offer, right? So like in terms of trying to determine and independently research, right, for someone who is looking to find alternative or healthy options before it gets to the point where they actually need assistance, the level of being overwhelmed is so unreal that in and of itself creates depression. It in and of itself creates anxiety. It's not always clinical, right? It's not always at a level where you have, a generalized anxiety disorder, right? But regardless, there is so much overwhelming information that at times it's easier to be like, F it. I'm just not going to eat the bagel, and instead I'll eat, I don't know,
my
just
lettuce
the Greek
wrap.
yogurt.
That's really sad.
Exactly.
Or I'm just not going to eat because
or
it's too hard to make these choices. That's
and
I see that a
maybe I
lot.
should just starve, because
Often,
that is going to lead to success.
Often we just see food avoidance, right?
Yes.
And then it becomes a pattern, right? Well, when you add in other concepts like emotional labor, right? Mom does not have time, right, to meal plan for herself independently from 2 kids she's got to get to practice, right? And these kids need this, and these kids need this, and this kid is 3, so they live on Velveeta and French fries, right? And this kid is 7, and this one needs X, Y, and Z, right? When you add in the emotional labor aspects of food that come to being in a home, and then you add in the time, and you add in the lack of education, because I don't know about you, but I didn't go to school and learn legitimate nutritional information.
Yeah,
that was
I had
helpful.
to go get a very expensive graduate degree
Correct.
to do that, and spend 2 years literally nonstop around the clock learning.
Correct.
So there was nothing in undergrad or K-12. Forget about it.
Absolutely. Right. So like in terms of...
But I did learn in health class how to put a condom on a banana. That's been really helpful.
Good.
In my
that
life.
is helpful, and I will not back down. Okay, they need that.
I feel like
they need that.
at least I know how to do that.
That is
class.
helpful. Okay. I am glad that you learned that, and I wish
Thank
more
you.
of them did. That's not a skill I want them to stop learning. Please practice at home.
But how to build a balanced plate and have a good relationship with food, not
Absolutely
Not
not
at all.
taught.
So in terms of like understanding how food and nutrition continue to impact you, or and it's not like we learned about emotional labor as kids, right? Like we didn't learn about that, and how it looks and how it feels. I mean, and some of that you can't learn until you're in it, right? That's not practical. Remember when we were all pregnant, or if we were all pregnant, and people would say, just wait, and then you wanted to punch them in the throat, right? Like that feeling of knowing something was coming because you weren't part of the club yet, and you knew it, but then you were a part of the club,
And then
once
you were
had your
thrown
kids,
into it, and it's chaos when you're in it.
Yeah, and then you wanted to cry all the time. Like it is just in terms of there being so many variables that impact food, right? Whether it's generational trauma or generational food trauma or generational actual trauma, right? Or whether it's just the lack of education or the impression that you have with food. There's so many different variables that impact food and our relationship to it, and it's really difficult for each client, I think, to create an understanding of all the variables that have developed into their relationship with food. When I get somebody new, we kind of look at what all of those are to really figure out how aggressive can we be in the beginning. A lot of them are more aggressive, and I have to pull them back, right? A lot of them are already doing really aggressive stuff, and I have to be like, can we stop? Okay, you can eat the Hershey Kisses. Like, knock it off, all right?
Yeah.
Just eat the Hershey Kisses. Don't make yourself throw up, right? But in terms of like, how we are restricting. Most people are far more restrictive in the beginning, but it's not sustainable.
Yep.
Right? So that's the thing, is this lack of sustainability. And I know you guys see this, right?
All the
so
time.
We have to
Every
stop
single
it.
client, literally.
Yeah.
They like the laundry list. Part of my intake is what have you done in the past to feed into where you say like, tell me about your history,
Right.
Kimberly, with your clients,
What's
like
worked and what hasn't worked.
right. And also like what's worked, because I'm very interested. It's usually always like, okay, so when I did keto during the pandemic with my husband, it worked.
Yeah.
And I dropped XYZ. But then, and I'm like, well, wait a second, what exactly worked about this? Because you gained all of that weight plus some back. You're even more unhappy, and you fear carb containing foods on another level that I actually feel like I need to provide you with external resources of qualified professional help for this. Like, so did it actually work? And that's my whole thing, is like, it doesn't work if you have to keep going back to it time and time again to see results, right? If you're like, well, it'll work when I do keto or Atkins,
But they didn't make it a lifestyle. They made it just another diet.
Just
and that's
another
the problem.
fad. Yeah.
Thank you for tuning in to part 1 of our conversation with Sam Withrow. We covered a lot of information on eating disorders. If you or anyone you know are struggling with their food relationships, we hope this gives you the encouragement to seek professional help. While resources are limited, they are there, and we are so grateful Sam is in our community to support and empower anyone looking for help. Please like, share, and comment on this episode to spread awareness and get support to others in the community who need help. Take it from me, Kimberly, living with eating disorders is lonely. There is hope and help available to you. Tune in for part 2 next week as we finish our conversation with Sam. We'll be diving into a very specific eating disorder topic called ARFID. Thank you for joining us. Until next time, friends.
Thanks for spending your time with us. If you found this podcast helpful, we would love for you to share it with your friends and family. And don't forget to subscribe on your podcast platform. If you have nutrition or fitness questions you want answered on future episodes, we would love to hear from you. You can submit these questions to our email, thenutritionrevolutionpodcast@gmail.com, and follow us on Instagram at thenutritionrevolutionpodcast.